Dare I say the Winnipeg Jets might have found their magic bullet for how to cure many of their 5v5 ails. 3 straight games of 5v5 dominance, including tonight's win against the Seattle Kraken.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Evening, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you enjoy what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about Winnipeg's big win against Seattle. And now that we have a 3-game sample with a new lineup, I think we're starting to see some very interesting trends. And I want to chat about that, maybe what it means for the longer term, perhaps some interesting contract discussions, and what I hope the Jets do once the playoffs start to roll around here in a couple of months. But before we dive into that, just wanted to let you know that tonight's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and be sure to use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Stay tuned to hear about how Gametime can get you to your favorite events faster and easier. Now, like I said, the Jets just finished playing the Seattle Kraken, and for a game that kind of started off a little bit inauspiciously, it was very fast, and I think the Jets were pretty even with Seattle. It was one of those very back and forth opening periods. It didn't end that way. And the great thing was that Winnipeg was the one who really took over. After about the halfway point of this game, the Jets just started, actually maybe even before then, the Jets just started to take over this game. This is one of those scenarios where Winnipeg was, far and away by the end of the game, the much better team. They controlled offensive zone possession. They grinded Seattle to a pulp. And I know the scoreline is going to show a 2-1 win for the Jets. This game, quite frankly, could have been like 4-0, 5-0, all that stuff. Yes, Matty Beniers did score one tip-in, and so the scoreline looks pretty close. The Jets didn't really score a lot, but I promise you, Winnipeg absolutely owned from top to bottom. This was sheer dominance. And I think it shows a really good trend with this team recently where the Jets, after, months of kind of living on your power play and goaltending, the Jets are starting to actually dictate the pace of the game and control it from a top 9 perspective. This is what I've been really hoping the Jets would do. And, okay, look, it's not great that it kind of came off of injuries. I think, that sort of trend is a little concerning because you would like the coaching staff to maybe identify this stuff earlier, but I hope that the Winnipeg Jets coaching staff is paying attention to what Winnipeg has been doing over the past few games. These line combinations are seriously doing well, and we'll focus a little bit more on which lines are really impressive and which players have stood out. But top to bottom, this game really didn't have too many blemishes. Outside of the first period where the Jets maybe had a few more turnovers than I think they would like, and there were some turnovers later in the game, for the most part, the Jets really just took it to Seattle, especially after like minute 25 or so. The Kraken basically did not sniff anything near Hellebuck for the rest of the game. The Jets were dominant, they pressured, and this was a full team effort, very good from the ground up. Even the third pairing on D was generally fine. A couple of turnovers and stuff from both Heinola and Stanley. Otherwise, I thought Winnipeg generally controlled play, and Heinola was able to clean up a couple of things on his own end. Stanley generally kept himself out of trouble for the most part. So I think when you're looking at that sort of assessment, that's probably the most important thing. You really don't have much to dissect here because the Jets just controlled play. Yes, obviously the 5v5 scoring wasn't ideal just because they only got one goal there. But I think if you look at how Decord had to really bail this Kraken team out and quite frankly how much he was under siege the whole night, it did kind of feel inevitable. This Jets team was pressuring the whole game. They really started to take over. And the final straw that broke the camel's back was in the last 27 seconds of the game. Nick Ehlers curled along the left half wall and created space, which allowed DeMello to trail in. DeMello gets the puck and roofs an absolute beauty on a great screen by Lowry. So This was just a perfect team goal, and also very funny that 27 assists on a goal with 27 seconds left. So a little bit of symmetry there. Dylan DeMello getting his second of the year. Not a guy that you would usually expect to roof the puck off that often. Not exactly a pronounced shooter or sniper, but hey, you will absolutely take it. Just a great game from the bottom up. And, I think this was yet another sign that the Jets have maybe turned a corner. And I know that the record has been really good this year. Almost from the first week, the Jets have basically just been winning left and right. But the way that they win has been perhaps more of a question. The past few games, the Jets are genuinely winning the right way. If this game was a loss, I don't think I would have been that upset by it. I actually would have been more upset for the team because I would have felt that they frankly just deserve better. This was a game in which they deserved to win 5-1, 5-0, whatever. I mean, the Jets, quite frankly, could have run away with the scoreline had Decord not been really good in net. So overall, just very impressed. I'm glad that the Jets coaching staff is starting to put 2 and 2 together. The top line, obviously at 5v5, they didn't really do anything, in terms of actually scoring, but they did get a very nice power play goal. And the power play just continues to be sensational. So, man, if there's one thing that you just don't ever have questions about, it is Winnipeg's power play. They are just almost automatic. They have the top-ranked power play in the league. It is completely just a matter of time before you score on it. It is very scary. The decision to make Ehlers kind of one of your roaming puck movers and to have Scheifele leave the half wall more often has really paid dividends. Davis Payne, whatever he's making is probably not enough. He has been tremendous for this Jets team, one of their clearly very best offseason acquisitions, and really one of the most transformative acquisitions, period. So happy for him. He continues to do really well. And what's also a little interesting about this game is some of the ice time splits. We're seeing, 18 minutes for Peretti, nearly 17 minutes for Lowry, 16 minutes for Kupari. The fourth line really did not play that much. Honestly, I wouldn't mind giving them a little more ice time. Gustafsson, Barron, and Toninato playing 8.5 minutes or less, and in Toninato's case and Gustafsson's case, a lot less. I don't think you have to bench them all that often. I think you can afford to give them a couple more shifts. So overall, the top 9 was just really feeling it. And this is kind of the game that I think gives you more confidence about how the Jets might be in the postseason. The last couple of games have really started to push that direction. And I think if you're really looking for evidence that Winnipeg is starting to get it, this is the kind of game and performance that you really want to see. So very impressive top to bottom. I guess the only thing that I kind of wonder is how long the Jets are willing to commit to this. I know that I've talked about this before, but it is kind of one of those situations where, when everyone gets healthy, what are the Jets going to do? You'll notice that I have some time set aside at the end of the episode to talk about that and how the Jets can, quite frankly, take advantage of what they're seeing now and make this team even better and also potentially help figure out what they really need at the trade deadline. But we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Before we get to any of that, though, I want to talk about the actual lineup changes themselves and what pairings and duos have really worked and, what you may want to see changed as the Jets start to get healthier. We will chat about all of that in just a brief second, but before we go any further, wanted to let you know about our friends and partners at Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire somebody yesterday, but how can you find amazing candidates fast? Well, you might be wondering what is the best way to do it, right? Are you going to go, to a newspaper ad or something? Well, you don't even have to do that. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your job posts at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. I've actually used Indeed myself when I was looking for work, and I can tell you it was super easy, very convenient. The resume builder is great. The salary ranges actually pull up results that match your requirements. And when you are filling in your work experience and job experience, Indeed will match you with positions that generally align with your discipline and your history. So it's super fast. And for an employer, I just have to imagine that this makes finding quality candidates so much faster. And now you too can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on the Locked On Winnipeg Jets podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are chatting about, a really impressive run of games from the Jets recently. They are generally just running play at 5v5, and that is a huge change from the earlier start of the season. Before the past couple of weeks, Winnipeg was okay at 5v5, but, you could very clearly see that the top line was having to do more of the heavy lifting, which doesn't always work for the squad. And the middle six wasn't really scoring or creating enough offense. And so, while you might look at the shot metrics and stuff and see that, perhaps the second line looked good on paper, when you actually watch them, you notice that they weren't actually able to create much in terms of great scoring opportunities. It was probably more on just possession values and stuff, right? Keeping the puck further up the ice and limiting chances against. But now the Jets have unlocked a new version of this team, and the first duo that's really kind of hit it off is Ehlers and Lowry. Now, Lowry is one of those guys that I've often said is, an elite third line center, but we've often kind of wondered, what could he do if he played with skill? I think the thing with Lowry is that in terms of like elite scoring talent, he doesn't have it. But what he does have is elite space making. The guy is a completely unbelievable wrecking ball. There's no one really on this team who sort of forechecks and creates space the way that he does. In fact, the only thing that his game really lacks is just points, right? He does everything else so well. And if he had really good finishing and better setup play, he would be an elite middle six center. As it is, he already kind of is. It's just that the points don't allow him to get above maybe like a third line role on most teams. But for the Jets, if you pair him with skill, I think what we're seeing is just fantastic play, right? Lowry is driving towards the slot. Ehlers is working great perimeter play. Iafallo on this line has been fantastic. In fact, Iafallo has been so good recently that I do wonder if the Jets might be able to bring him back on a much cheaper contract. The only thing with him is that he's been priced at $4 million this season. If he had a reduced cap hit at $3 million or less, I really wouldn't have any issue bringing him back for a couple of seasons. His cap projection is actually expected to be around $2.5 million by 3 years for his next deal. So if that modeling is correct, and it typically is, I would be very into that. $2.5 million for 3 years, with Iafallo being a really serviceable, versatile middle six player who brings great defensive value, who's a great PKer, and who has enough skill to actually do some of the forechecking work on a higher line. I think that would be fantastic. So Iafallo really impressing me lately, and in this role alongside Lowry and Ehlers, this line has just really been putting pedal to the metal. Ever since Ehlers and Peretti were broken off, it's just been a much better run of form for Nick. Ehlers is finding more chemistry. He's able to make those passes a little more cleanly, and it's just working out much better for this unit. They were piling up chances against Seattle tonight, and quite frankly, they could have had 2 or 3 points per player with how good this line was performing. So overall, fantastic line change. Very good to see how good Lowry and Ehlers are together. You should probably make them a staple going forward, because I think that duo is good enough to do almost anything that you ask of them. And it almost makes you wonder, if you add another scoring winger to that line, what that trio might accomplish. The second duo worth chatting about is Peretti and Niederreiter. I know that Peretti hasn't scored like loads of points this season relative to what we all kind of thought he might do, but the past couple of games he has been doing much more dangerous work. One of those games he had a couple of assists, and I think as he continues to play at this level, and maybe they get an upgrade at center over Kupari, this could be a really dangerous trio. Niederreiter likes to go towards the net and operate between defenders in tight spaces down low. Peretti likes to make passes to those kinds of players and use those inside channels for great scoring chances. And if you find a center who adds a little more skill to the spot that Kupari is occupying, I think it could be a really tasty combo. Kupari's done fine so far, and generally speaking, I don't really have any complaints. I just think if you're looking for somebody who can make your third line another juggernaut, it might just be an upgrade in skill there, because Kupari is one of those guys who's very fast and he can do some nice stuff here and there. But for the most part, he's not really like an offensive dynamo. So you'd probably be looking at maybe some sort of a trade deadline acquisition. I think that, the Jets are in a good spot to add here. And, given how well this top nine is performing, it's pretty easy to envision how the Jets might make some sweet changes towards the trade deadline. The fact that this unit is looking more in the way that the 17-18 team looks is great news. That team won at 5v5. They generally won on the power play. They had great goaltending, and this team is starting to echo that. Obviously, it is a short sample size, and, we are looking at a team that perhaps, once the playoffs start, things change a little bit. But this is the kind of play that I would say encourages me a lot. This is what I've been wanting to see from them. I've been hoping that they would start to turn their form on and become more of a balanced across the board kind of team. Good 5v5 play. They've already got a superstar power play, so no problem there. PK has been, it's a little inconsistent. I don't love the PK. You don't have to worry about that as much if other parts of your team are super strong. I would like to have a league average PK at some point, but if they don't get to it at this season, it's probably not the end of the world. So overall, I just think the Jets and this new top nine have really fit quite nicely. And I hope it also kind of shows, the value in other ways for a guy like Peretti, who's been really good on the forecheck, who's been making really smart reads. And it's just a matter of actually pairing him with players who feel and play the way that he does, right? If you pair him with guys who don't think the game at a high level or who don't have enough skill to take advantage of his reads, you're not really going to see his value. And so I think that that's a really big change and hopefully one the Jets continue on going forward. But yeah, what a change this middle six has been. And it also allows the top line to, again, not have as much stress to have to carry the full offensive load. For its part, I think the top line has generally been fine. Not really much to complain about recently. Maybe in some games they haven't been quite as dominant on the shot clock as maybe you'd hope. But in terms of their actual goal production and stuff, they're still doing those really crazy, behind the back passes, eyes in the back of their head sort of plays. The skill is still taking over. And so for now, it's really fine. In previous seasons, you'd probably want them to do a little more. Right now, they're generally keeping up and doing more than enough to be a good line. So I don't think you have to worry so much right now. Obviously keep an eye out in case that changes. But so far, the top nine is generally looking fantastic. And this is sort of what we've talked about in the past about how important it is for the Jets to really have optimized lines. This team is not going to outright win with a McDavid or a McCarr or McKinnon or, perhaps one of those other top players like a Barkov. The Jets have to win by committee. And I know people will often look at this team and say, well, they don't have like a top 5 draft pick playing up front, but they've got a guy who is equivalent to a lottery pick, maybe even a first overall caliber player in net. Hellebuck is that lottery pick. And so if you treat him like that, you are looking at a very good team that can do stuff that other squads can't. Having a franchise-defining netminder in goal is a game changer when the rest of the league is dealing with one of the lowest save percentages across the board that we've seen in this era of hockey. So the Jets have a huge advantage there. Defensively, they've shown some real grit and resolve. In tonight's game, they were dominant. They basically gave Seattle almost nothing after the first period, and the offense was peppering Decor the whole night. Had they been able to crack him a little more, and if he had maybe one or two mistakes, the Jets really could have piled on goals. They hit a crossbar or two. They got really close on other chances. It was just, one of those games where they really had to fight for every goal for some reason, despite just dominating plays. So fantastic performance. Very thrilled. Great to see the middle six is really starting to turn it on. And it does bring up a question of what the Jets do with guys like the Nemesnikov and Appleton once they're back. I want to chat about that in just a little bit. But before we dive into that specific aspect, did want to let you know about our friends and partners at Gametime. I love going to live events, whether it's hockey games, soccer matches, or in a lot of cases, I just came back from a metal concert tonight, and it's a great time to make favorite memories and have the experience of all the energy and excitement that you can't just get from watching something on TV. Gametime knows that feeling, and they want to get you to events even faster and easier. They have a brand new feature called Gametime Picks that filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats and tickets. I was looking for a game last year, Kansas City versus Baltimore for the championship game. The Gametime app pulled up the lowest price ticket, best, for the best value, right? Like an upper level seat in a good section with a great view. They actually show you a seat view. They show you all in pricing up front if you toggle it on, so you know exactly what you're paying for. And it was a fantastic experience, great price, and they can help you get to events faster too. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Folks, we're just closing out really quickly with some final thoughts ahead of what could be a very interesting next couple of weeks for the Jets. Vlad Namestnikov, Hayden Fleury, Colin Miller, and of course Mason Appleton are all in some various shape of injured but recovering. And it sounds like Namestnikov and Appleton might be a little closer than the other guys. Fleury is getting closer too. Miller may still need a little more time. He's still no contact as well. But it seems like Appleton and Vlad might be about to return. And if that's the case, I think the Jets really should not be focused on putting back the lines that they were before. If they do, I think that would be a profound disappointment. And it would also show to me that they miss why these lines are working. Namestnikov, not at 2C, is a huge upgrade. Lowry has been able to do this job fantastically well. Having Iafallo be kind of that Appleton role and sort of swap with Peretti every now and then has been much more effective. And to me, you'd be best served having Namestnikov and Appleton on your fourth line. If you do that, you have a ridiculously stacked squad. I'm not quite sure who I would necessarily take out other than Toninato immediately. Obviously, Toninato is probably needed for the Moose anyways. That would be my first move. And in terms of who would get benched, it's a really tough decision, right? In my mind, Kupari is probably going to be the one who stays in over Gustafsson. I think Dave is probably looked at as a nice sort of 13th forward. In my mind, I would actually like to see Gustafsson alongside Niederreiter and Perfetti. I think Dave is a really smart player, and it's not really an accident that when he got into the fourth line with Kupari, that line went from being, a bit in the dumps over the past couple of weeks to suddenly turning their form around and being an Elite Four checking force again. I don't know that it was necessarily on any one player, but when Gus came back in, it was just a very different trio. And I feel like Barron's game improved considerably once Gustafsson was back in. And so I kind of wonder, before the Jets make a trade deadline acquisition, could Gustafsson help that third line center role? I don't think that you would want him there in the playoffs, but in the meantime, before you get there, I kind of wonder if he'd do really well alongside Perfetti and Niederreiter. He's a smart player. He seems to always be in the right area near the puck. He'll fight for turnovers. He'll fight for recoveries. And he has an extra layer of skill that maybe Kupari doesn't always demonstrate. And he's not exactly slow. He's not the top-end skater that maybe Kupari can be, but he's also good enough to know where his limits are and how to take advantage of his higher-level IQ. So for me, I just hope that the Jets don't go back to the top nine the way it was before. If they do, again, I just feel like the team will have missed why things are working for this team, and it's going to mess up the really good 5v5 play. Now, that's my sense. Obviously, I could be wrong, and maybe the Jets change the lines back and everything is hokey-dory, and it actually pans out really well. But based on what I'm seeing out of the past couple of games, I just don't see a reason to return to what you had. And I hope that this Ehlers-Lowry combo continues. I really don't want Perfetti back up there. That duo doesn't really work when you have Ehlers and Perfetti together on a line. I would much prefer that they keep this the way it is. You could probably upgrade on maybe Iafallo or something on that second line just to add a little more of a scoring presence. But as it is, they've done a great job as a trio. If they keep it together, I think that's totally fine. They dominated in this game against the Kraken. They've been good the past couple of games. And so I just hope that the Jets don't suddenly reward spots back to players just because that's where they were before the injury. If anything, I think this recent stretch has kind of shown which players were maybe being asked to do too much and which guys could honestly stand to get more responsibility and assignments. So far, Peretti is really doing a good job of that middle 6-4 checking role. Niederreiter is finding a spark of offense again. Lowry has probably deserved a look at 2C for much of the season, just never really had it. Now that you've got these injuries, that's been a different case. Will it be perfect every game? No, probably not. There are going to be games where the Jets probably drop some results. Maybe they don't show out quite as well as they did the past couple of games, and you have some doubts, but I think they should just stay the course. What they're showing so far is a much better process, and I've always said that how the Jets play and how they accomplish their results is more important to me than sometimes the final record. Obviously, you want to keep winning games, and that's a really critical part, but I don't really ever worry about the Jets winning. They tend to do that naturally anyways because they've got an elite power play and they've got elite goaltending. But when you get to the playoffs, you also want to make sure that your 5v5 game is in order, and I think the Jets have finally found the right balance to get them to that state. Again, I don't know that the coaching staff is going to make any changes. Arneal has said that he likes what he sees, and if that's the case, maybe this is finally the turning point. I don't want to read too much into it. I mentioned this on a previous episode, but this feels like the sort of similar turning point to how the Jets in 17-18 suddenly went from being an okay team at 5v5 to being dominant. Injuries sort of forced a lineup change. That, in turn, led to some really drastic overhauls to how the Jets played, and Winnipeg never really looked back. I hope that this is that same deciding point and that the Jets are finally, figuring out what it means to be a truly elite play-controlling team, because I think you can do really good, performances and go deep in the playoffs if you adopt this sort of mindset. And if it doesn't work out, at least the Jets put up a much better effort than their past couple of seasons. That's all I've ever really asked for the Jets, is to put up their best effort. And if this gets rewarded and they go on a deep playoff run, I hope it serves to instruct the coaching staff and the organization going forward. But I'm curious to know how you feel about all this. Are you happy with the lineup changes? Do you like the way the Jets are playing? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Obviously, the Jets are about to take on the Calgary Flames this weekend. Going to be a good game on a Saturday. We will preview that one tomorrow and talk about it a little bit. But for tonight's episode, that is going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. We will see you back here tomorrow evening for more Jets coverage, so see you then. But for tonight, have a great night, and as always, go Jets go.